Number 38 in our hymnal, Morning Has Broken. Whose name I don't remember. Let's say the words together. Enriched by our differences and joined together in our search for meaning, we covenant with ourselves and each other to seek truth in a spirit of love, to strive for justice, and to serve others in more. Please be seated. If you're viewing the service this morning on Zoom, please remember you can activate closed captioning if that's helpful for you. And if you'd like to talk with others after the service, there will be a virtual coffee hour. Just stay logged in. I've done this in the past, and it's quite enjoyable to talk to people on Zoom. You'll be invited to join a breakout room. So stay on after the service. You can converse and get to know people in the church. If you're attending in person, you'll know who you are. You're here. Please join us for coffee hour after the service. We had a wonderful auction last night, and I would like to ask Rachel to say a few words about all the people who worked on the auction. But first of all, as Rachel comes up, let's thank her.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for everyone who came last night, everyone who donated items to the auction, which is still going on, and everyone who bid on the items last night. I want to shout out all the people that helped this year, and I may have missed a few, so forgive me if I have. I'd like to thank Janet Booz, our executive team lead. I'd like to thank the committee, Rob Sartain, Jody Malloy, Marva Williams, Liz Small, Don Sloat, Megan Grissom, Leah I say your name wrong every time, Lafayette. So beautiful. Patty Hove. I'd like to thank our auctioneers last night, Chrissy Bushyeager, Lana Vitale, Greg Harris, Garrett Thompson, our, I think, first ever Yucky auctioneer. He did a great job. And Kate Ramos, our fantastic MC. I'd like to thank Joy Thiessen, Ann Seidman, Marsha McAllister, and Gabby Sachs, our entertainers. And I would like to thank our additional helpers, Jean Wallace, Jane Seeloss, Mary Clinton, Jennifer Gold, our yuckies that joined us last night. That was Mesfin Garrett, I believe David, Brianna, Caleb, and Noah, Lynn George, Mags Barleski, and to all who stayed after to help clean up. Thank you so, so much. The silent auction is still online right now through November 13th. We said it about 3,000 times yesterday for anyone who was here. It ends November 13th. Our 50/50 is still live too. That benefits the yuckies. That will be picked on November 13th as well. Tickets are $10. You get half, the yuckies get half. Last year, I think our winner won over $750. So that's a great deal. And then finally, one last thing that I was asked to say, and of course I forgot the date, but Chili Chocolate Homebrew is coming up in January 21st. Thank you. And signups will be in the next couple of weeks. So please pay attention to those. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, please remain seated and our centering song will appear on the screen. It's also in the hymnal in the back. For those of you who would like the music, meditation on breathing. And you can read it with the music.
Okay, this is for Katie and I need to remember it from before. It's right up for you. For this note, it has 3 parts, one for and there's one for whatever skill level or whatever you. The first part is the drum bar.
Each Sunday, we gather in community, carrying whatever emotions we experience. We may be full of joy or sorrow, and we honor those feelings by dropping stones into this bowl of water. Just as the stones are held by the water, so are all who drop them held in love by this community. So please file up the aisle by the window as you wish to do so, and return down the center aisle. All are invited to join in this ritual. Those online can join us by entering joys and sorrows into the chat. And I drop a final stone for the joys and sorrows held by those online and for those who are unable to be with us today. Let's be together for a moment of prayer. Each of us comes to dip into the well that nourishes our hungry spirits. Each of us comes with our own cup of goodness to pour into that well. We drink together. May we be strengthened by our bonds of love and peace and caring. Amen. We say in our church that the offering is a sacrament of the free church. What we mean by this is that we believe it is a blessing to be able to govern and support our religious community ourselves, to make it possible by our generosity to live out our shared values. Every week, we lift up the spiritual value of generosity by taking an offering for the work of this church. Once upon a time, most folks used the offering plate to fulfill their pledges of financial support. Nowadays, you can text your donation to the number provided on the screen. Thank you. Chrissy took this morning off, and I agreed to tell this story. The Hating Book, a great children's story. I hated my friend. When it was her turn to wash the board, the chalkboard at school, she didn't ask me to help. When it was time to choose teams, she didn't choose me. And when I made a basket and everyone else yelled, "Yay!" she turned away. Ask her, my mother said. Ask your friend why. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. I'd rather die. What if she should say, "Oh, please, just go away. You're ugly and dumb. Being with you was never fun." Oh, I hate my friend. When I went to walk home with her from school, she had already gone. When she took her dog out and I whistled to him, she pulled on the leash and led him away. Oh, I hate my friend. I hate my friend. Ask her, my mother said. Ask and see. I wouldn't. I couldn't. But maybe Mom was right. You've been so rotten, I said. Why? She looked as though she'd cry. It's you, she said. Last week, when I wore my new dress, Sue said, Jane said, you said, I looked like a freak. I did not. I said, you looked neat. She looked straight at me for a while, and then we both began to smile. My friend said, hey, maybe tomorrow we can play. Oh, yes, I said. Okay. I don't hate her anymore. I wish it were tomorrow. And now, let's, excuse me, let's sing the children out with our sending song. While someone, some good Samaritan will give me a glass of water. Thank you. First, we'll sing it through, and then the children will depart after we sing through once. Is that right, Robert? Robert, tell them what to do. Teachers first. Okay. There are two kinds of people. Those who remember to turn the mute off and those who forget. Many people have written short wisdom statements that divide humanity into two groups. The short sayings can be divided into two groups, the humorous sayings and the serious ones. Here are examples of both. Indira Gandhi said, "My grandfather once told me that there were two kinds of people, those who do the work and those who take the credit. He told me to try to be in the first group. There was much less competition." Joseph Marti, people are divided into two groups, those who love and build and those who hate and destroy. Robert Frost, there are two kinds of people, some willing to work and the rest willing to let them. Oscar Wilde, there are only two kinds of people who are really fascinating, people who know absolutely everything and people who know absolutely nothing. Oliver Wendell Holmes, people can be divided into two classes, those who go ahead and do something and those who sit still and inquire, why wasn't it done the other way? James Thorpe, the world is divided into two types of people, those who love to talk and hate to listen. Abigail Van Buren. There are two kinds of people. Those who walk into a room and say, "There you are." And those who walk into a room and say, "Here I am." Seth Berman. There are two kinds of people. Those who believe in global warming and those who don't. Robert Bryan. There are two kinds of people. Those who finish what they start, and so on. Edward A. Murphy Jr. of Murphy Laws gets the last word. There are two kinds in the world. Those who divide people into two types and those who don't. Robert.
There are also two types when it comes to voting. Those who and those who are not. This morning, they are my mind to you, I agree overall. And it is encouragement for all to have an order to go over the agree.
Thank you. In the fall of 1993, I was a new minister in a church just outside Washington, D.C. And a couple came to talk to me. They both worked in television news. He was a sports reporter and she was a straight reporter. And the young woman said to me, I worked in the White House on Barbara Bush's staff in the public relations area. But I get the impression in this Unitarian church that everyone is a Democrat. Can a registered Republican be a Unitarian Universalist? Well, I explained that some in the congregation were registered to vote as Republicans. They were quiet about it, but they were there. I told her that other members of the congregation had also worked for Republican administrations. We had a member who had served in the White House as one of the secretaries to Henry Kissinger. I added that beyond our congregation, there were Unitarian Universalists who were also Republicans. For example, in the Senate that year in 1993, Republican Senator William Cohen of Maine and Republican Senator Bob Packwood of Oregon both identified as Unitarian Universalists. I told her then about one of my heroes, Elliot Richardson. Richardson was a Republican. He's the only individual in history to serve in four cabinet-level positions within the United States government. He was Richard Nixon's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. Then Richard Nixon appointed him as Secretary of Defense. And then Richard Nixon appointed him as Attorney General. Later, he was President Ford's Secretary of Commerce. In 1973, Elliot Richardson became famous and a national hero during the Watergate scandal when he resigned as Attorney General rather than follow President Nixon's order to fire Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. In addition to being a Republican, Elliot Richardson was a lifelong member, committed member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Boston's Back Bay, First Church Boston, established in 1630. He was part of a long tradition. During the 19th century, all Unitarians were members of Lincoln's Republican Party. The last Unitarian elected president, William Howard Taft, was a Republican. Taft attended All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington until his death in 1930. And Taft was the only person who became both President of the United States and also the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Well, the couple decided to stay in the church, and they were active participants in the congregation for 10 years until they moved to another part of the country. Of course, there were also many Unitarian Universalist Democrats. Unitarian churches in the 1950s became a mixture of Democrats and Republicans. Adlai Stevenson, a Unitarian from Bloomington, Illinois, ran for president as a Democrat. I was 9 years old in 1960, attending a Unitarian Universalist religious education program. I remember my mother made the decision to vote for John Kennedy, a Democrat, while my father leaned in the direction of voting for Richard Nixon My father looked at Vice President Nixon's background as a Quaker and hoped that Nixon might be less inclined to go to war. In this, Unitarian Universalists were not special. In the 1950s, among mainstream Protestant churches, there was no relationship between church attendance and affiliation with a particular political party. Regular Protestant churchgoers voted both Democrat and Republican. Now, this continued into the 1970s. In the election between Democrat Jimmy Carter and Republican Jerry Ford, I remember a Unitarian Universalist minister saying from the pulpit on the Sunday before that election, "I am going to vote for Carter. However, if Ford wins, I will not regard it as a disaster. He appears to me to be a very good man." But after 1976, this started to change. This shift was documented in a 2008 book called The Big Sort, Why the Clustering of Like-Minded Americans is Tearing Us Apart. In 1976, only 27% of Americans lived in landslide counties that voted either Democrat or Republican by a margin of 20% or more. Only 27% were landslide counties. By 2008, 48% of Americans lived in a landslide county. And in 2020, in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, there was a landslide county with a margin of 26% between the winning candidate, Mr. Biden, and the losing candidate, Mr. Trump. Until the 1980s, people with college degrees were evenly distributed among American cities. After 1980, Americans started to cluster based on education. College-educated liberals clustered in lifestyle enclaves like Berkeley, California, or Cambridge, Massachusetts. Delaware County ranks among the counties with the most college graduates in Pennsylvania, with about 40% of us having a bachelor or a graduate degree. In such places, liberals clustered around many activities. Church attendance decreased in such places. Interview shows were moved from Sunday afternoon to Sunday morning, and liberals stayed home to watch. Liberals listened to national public radio. Today, liberals are more interested in other cultures and other places and travel more. Liberals are more likely to engage in individualistic activities. They subscribe to Netflix and Amazon Prime. Compared to conservatives, liberals are more likely to own cats. On the other hand, conservatives cluster in places like Texas's King County. In that county, the Democratic candidate in 2016 in the presidential election only received 3% of the vote. Studies showed that clusters of conservatives tend to share many lifestyle choices. They, the conservatives, spend more time with family. They get their news from Fox, and they are more likely to own guns. They read sports magazines, and they frequently visit relatives. They believe that people should take responsibility for their own lives, and they think that overwhelming force is the best way to defeat terrorists. In conservative communities like the Villages in Florida, people are more likely to attend church. They are more likely to participate in clubs, volunteer services, and city projects. They are more supportive of traditional authority. They are more family-oriented, and they express more feelings of economic vulnerability. They experience higher levels of stress. They spend more time on social activities with other people. Conservatives tend to cluster in areas where there is less population density. And compared to liberals, conservatives are more likely to own dogs. Well, this process of clustering has transformed American religion. In contrast to the 1950s, when Republicans and Democrats worshiped side by side, today few churches have a mixture of Republicans and Democrats. In 2020, 71% of white Americans who say they attend church services regularly voted for Donald Trump, 71%. According to a recent survey, white evangelical Protestants believe that God created America to be a new promised land for European Christians. They view non-white newcomers from other countries, like President Obama, whose father was from Africa, and Vice President Harris, whose mother was from India and whose father is from Jamaica. They view these new immigrants as a threat to American culture. I've been standing in line all my life to get my share of the American dream, said one man. And now these newcomers are jumping ahead of me in line. Meanwhile, religious liberals and the religiously unaffiliated, those who do not go to church at all, are embracing a vision for the future of America that is more inclusive. There is a positive result of this polarization, and that's been an increase in interest in politics. More people have lawn signs now. More people have bumper stickers. More people contribute financially to support candidates. Voting turnout has increased. Each major political party has become more organized and effective at communicating with their bases. Churches, which were torn apart in the 1960s over fights about the morality of civil rights and the Vietnam War, churches today are more peaceful, with fewer fights about political issues. But on the negative side, researchers have observed that like-minded groups not only enforce conformity, but also tend to grow more extreme. As liberals and conservatives separate, we become more zealous, more distrustful of those with whom we disagree. Most important to our democracy, because of this geographical clustering, we have seen two presidential elections in 2000 and again in 2016, where a candidate has won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. Well, all this clustering makes me think about ants. When I was a child in the 1950s, back when there were more Republicans who were members of Unitarian churches, my parents gave me an ant farm as a gift. It was a simple device, a section of sand held in place by two transparent plastic windows. It came in the mail with a tube of live ants. They mailed the ants through the mail. And some ant food. Well, we dumped the ants in the narrow slit between the two pieces of transparent plastic, and they landed on the sand. Then I could watch as the ants dug tunnels, just like it showed in the illustration on the box. It was a beautiful design. They created their own homes, and there was a little bit of ant food that I would give them each day. But, you know, young boys like to meddle. Eventually, I decided to do an experiment. I went outside and I collected more live ants from the yard, and I added them to the ant farm. More diversity. By the next day, every ant was dead. The new ants and the older ants and the old ants killed each other. For me, it was a lesson in polarization. In 1978, Harvard expert on ants, Edward Osborne Wilson, E.O. Wilson, published a book on human nature. He extrapolated that the behavior of ants in colonies could also be compared to the behavior of human beings. He said that out in the fields, when ant colonies grow so large that there is not enough food to feed all the ants, they go to war with the nearby ant colonies. The war continues until so many ants die that there is now enough food left to feed the remaining ants. Wilson suggested that, like ants, human beings form colonies. For example, we are a colony called the United States. We're a subcolony called Pennsylvania, one called Media, and one called the Unitarian Universalist Church. And the most important subcolony for most of us is our family. Wilson said that, like ants, we fight when we believe that the resources necessary for our colony's survival are threatened. When it comes to government policies, we don't ask, what is in it for me? We ask, what is in it for my group, for my tribe, my colony? Justifications people give for their aggressive acts, such as religious differences or political differences, are, in Wilson's view, just a veneer that covers the real reason: the perceived fear of death of the colony due to scarce resources. Now, the word perceive or perception is important here. In my ant farm, I would have given all of the ants enough food. They would not have been any actual scarcity. They did not need to fight each other. But the ants did not understand this. Wilson argued that when human beings believe we have enough resources, when we feel there's enough for all of us, then we are more likely to speak about such things as the inherent worth and dignity of all the people on the earth. However, Wilson argued, when we believe we're running out of resources, for example, when we see on nearly every street corner big electronic signs showing a higher price for gasoline, phrases such as the inherent worth and dignity of all people become less important, and we are replaced them with talk of the survival of our family and our friends. In times of perceived scarcity, we focus on supporting our tribe, our group. My retired brother-in-law, who worked hard for many years, is afraid that those who are not part of his conservative evangelical tribe want to take away his pension. My nephew, a successful businessman, is afraid that people who are not part of his conservative tribe want to tax his income and give the money away to people who do not want to work. In times of perceived scarcity, we focus on supporting our tribe. Some of us become more aggressive towards those who are not part of our tribe. One member of Congress said, "This is not a collegial body anymore. It's more like gang behavior. Members walk into the chamber full of hate." At the root of all our beliefs is the desire to ensure the survival of our tribe, our friends, our family, and ourselves. I try to remind myself of this. When I am with people who have a different point of view from mine, I try to talk to them, not turn my back. I ask them to tell me their story, to tell me about their work, their family, their hopes, their fears for their lives. I try to affirm the worth and dignity of every person. I imagine that they hold the view that they hold, because they want their family, their tribe to survive. And I look for ways to assure them that, as the president said last Wednesday evening in a speech, he said, at our best, America is not a zero-sum society where for you to succeed, someone else must fail. He said, America is big enough for everyone to succeed. Like the ants in my ant farm, we are more likely to survive if we can overcome our evolutionary programming that causes us to form tribes and fight. With planning, there are enough resources for all of us to live together. Still, sometimes our efforts to decrease polarization will fail because others are convinced that we threaten their survival. And nothing we do, no words that we speak, no assurances that we make, nothing we do changes that perception. Sometimes the other side will act like the ants in my ant farm and just keep fighting, no matter how hard I work to understand their point of view. So it's good to work for solutions that decrease polarization, but it's also good to have a backup plan. When we put up a Black Lives Matter sign in front of my Florida Unitarian Universalist church a few years ago, we received threats. So many threats that my assistant administrator, who was often alone in the building and who had worked for the State Department and the CIA in troubled areas around the world, I said, you must feel safe. She said, well, back in the embassies, we always had Marines. You have no Marines here at the church. So we got the threats, and I said, all right, we'll take the sign down. We don't want you to get hurt. In that Florida church, when I gave a sermon on abortion rights, we paid to have armed police at the church. My Jewish friends in Florida paid to have armed police outside their synagogues every Friday night. A few days ago, Paul Pelosi called the police for help as he was brutally attacked. So part of my backup plan includes contributing money to political campaigns. And just in case things get really bad, I make sure that my passport and the passports of my family are current. Still, I really hope things will get better. For the past 7 years, about 45% of the people have supported a cult-like leader. Now, in religion, I have seen cult-like leaders grow in power. But then I've also seen their followers become disillusioned. Eventually, the cult almost disappears. My hope is that someday soon, this will happen in our current political situation. I hope many liberals and conservatives will recognize that our survival depends on our ability to accept our differences and to work together. So in my own ministry, I continue to welcome and affirm political conservatives who seek us out and wish to be part of our community. I'm not suggesting that anyone compromise their beliefs. I am suggesting that I welcome and treat people who are different from me politically with respect. I am suggesting that I try to understand the point of view of others. It's harder for me to demonize a conservative if I have a conservative as a friend. And it's harder for a conservative to demonize me if the conservative has me as a friend. Over the years, I've talked to many potential new members. Some have asked me, can a Republican be a member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation? My answer is, I hope so. I hope so. And then I explain that Unitarians have a long tradition of being Republicans going back into the 19th century. and I welcome them to be part of a religious community where we affirm the dignity of everyone. Let's sing our closing hymn, 138, These Things Shall Be. Let's join together in our benediction. Ron, can you extinguish the chalice? Thank you. For those of you who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. And for those who come to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Blessed be. This concludes our service.
That's beautiful. And the centering song, you're there to find.